Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Ford. On behalf of our staff here at North Star, we want to welcome you to the last Lunch with a Leader for this little section of time that we have together before we break for the summer. I know that I have seen a few new faces here today. If today is your very first time in Lunch with a Leader, will you just slip up your hand really quickly? Got a couple here. Welcome. Yeah, welcome to you. Well, right off the bat, I want to say thank you to Andy and his team at Chick-fil-A. If you guys would just help me thank them. They do such a good job for us here. Well, if today is your first time at Lunch with a Leader, just a quick recap of what Lunch with a Leader is, why it came to be, what its purpose is. The whole reason that we started Lunch with a Leader was, our belief was if we could take the spiritual temperature of this room and we could raise it and we could encourage leaders and we could equip them and give them the tools that they need, then they could take that back into their organizations, into the places where they have leadership and influence, thereby raising the temperature of that organization. And so we've been talking for a while now about the life of Nehemiah. We'll be wrapping that up today. But I know that many of you have said, what are some other resources that I could have? Well, Mike Lynch, some of you may know, has a podcast. It's called the Lunch with a Leader podcast. I'm going to get them actually to throw a slide up here. If you want to scan that QR code, it will take you to the website where you can sign up for those podcasts and subscribe to them. The most recent podcast that he has out, she's not the author of this book, but she is a certified Five Voices trainer. And what I want to tell you about that is we just took our staff through this book. And it's really fascinating because it kind of takes the strengths that you have as a leader. Are you a guardian? Are you a connector? Are you a nurturer? Do you have a creative bent to your leadership? Are you a pioneer? And it takes those voices and it talks about how we can use those strengths and weaknesses of our voices along with the teams that we lead to really have a more effective conversation and leadership style. So I want to invite you to check that podcast out, and hopefully you'll share it with your friends as well. Well, today, like I said, we're going to be continuing our talk about Nehemiah. Mike's got a special guest with him. But I know some of you are sitting at tables with people that you know and you probably came here with. But as we saw, we have a few new faces in the room. So we'd love to just invite you to stand up, flip your chair around, say good afternoon, introduce yourself to somebody there nearby you, and we'll get going in just a few minutes. Thanks for being here, everybody.
All right. Well, it is so great to see each of you. If I have never met you before, my name is Mike Lynch, and it really is an honor that you took time out of your work schedule to be here today. We want to honor your time, but truly, this event would not be possible without our amazing friends, Andy Duncan and his team from Chick-fil-A. Would you guys thank Andy and their amazing team for being here every month for doing this? I remember we did this runner back in December of 2017. I remember we had 20 of us in the True North building, and I said, I got an idea, and I have lots of ideas that don't go very far, and so I got an idea, let's try this, and we did it, and after it was over, I said, Andy, what do you think? And Andy goes, I'll sponsor it every month. And little did we know it would go from 20 to a room like this, but the reason Andy does this is he believes in you, and he believes if he can invest in a leader, and a leader can change their organization, and there's nobody that represents that better than Nehemiah. We are wrapping up. We have been in Nehemiah's life. I have spent more time with Nehemiah than I have my children. All right, it's been an amazing time we've had over the past year and a half, unpacking every part of his journey, from the beginning of his journey till the end of his journey. Today is a look back in the rearview mirror to capture the highlights of Nehemiah's life. I almost think of it so for those of us in the room that do what we do for a living, there's times I have to sit down with families after someone has passed and say, capture their life for me. Tell me about them. I didn't know them. Tell me about this person. And this is a phrase I always use when I meet with families. Give me some adjectives that describe their life. Today we're going to do that with Nehemiah's life. We're going to look back at Nehemiah and go, here are the things that Nehemiah did. So we're in a series here at North Star called Echoes. And we say there's stories worth retelling. These are the traits of Nehemiah's life that to me, they echo. So on your table are outlines. Go ahead and pass those out, those pens. If you want to keep that pen, you are more than welcome to keep that pen. If it doesn't write, you can still keep it. But anyways, so here are some thoughts on Nehemiah, all right? This is the verse that I think captures Nehemiah. I just want you to listen to it. Nehemiah asked about his people. He asked about his homeland. And these are the words that came back to him. Things are not going well. You know, if you ever ask how somebody's doing and you get back the response, the pause, yeah, things aren't looking good. Things aren't going well. I just ran into one of our staff members that ran into somebody at North Star that's been sick for a while, and his response was, he didn't look well. Things aren't going well. And listen to what they said. For those who return to the province of Judah. And then this word came back. Listen, they are in great trouble and disgrace. The walls of Jerusalem have been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire. And at that moment, I think the life of Nehemiah jumped into gear. I think up until that moment, Nehemiah was living his life. Nehemiah was doing what he did. Nehemiah was successful. Nehemiah had raised himself in prominence. But at that moment, when that word came, it was the tap on the shoulder where Nehemiah left the sideline and he got involved in a game that his life would be known for. Up until that time, he was one of many. But at that moment, Nehemiah stepped off the sideline. He stepped in the middle of the playing field. And we sit and talk about his life thousands and thousands and thousands of years later because of the lessons we learned. There's something in Nehemiah's life for you. And I'm telling you, I believe that all of you have been equipped at some level of leadership. God has given you a gift. You have raised yourself from prominence. Here's what we don't know. We don't know when that time's gonna come in our lives when we leave the sideline and we really get on the field that God created us for. And that's what we're gonna talk about today. So would y'all pray with me? Probably a lot of you came in on two wheels this morning just trying to get here after a crazy Monday morning. Would you just ask the Lord to give you eyes to see and ears to hear what he has for you? Would you? Because I don't think it's an accident you're here. Would you just ask him? And then would you say maybe one of the most dangerous sentences we could ever utter to the Lord? God, when you call me, I'm ready. Did you tell him that? Father, today we ask that you pull up a chair in our lives. Father, we ask that for a few short minutes, people from government and law enforcement and education and business, nonprofit, church, that God, we could hear with clarity what you want to say to us. So God, you got permission to walk in this room. God, I pray that none of this great crowd will remember anything that I say, but they will sure remember what you whispered. And God, we give it over to you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. And everybody said? So let's look back at Nehemiah's life. A couple traits we're going to knock out today. Trait number one. What stands out about Nehemiah? Nehemiah started with a burden. Every great work of God always begins with a burden. Every great work always begins with what could be. It began with a burden, something that kept him up, something that caused a stir in his life. There was a great author and pastor at one time, and he called it this, and I love this phrase if you want to write it down, holy discontent. Like there was a holy discontent about what could be. The greatest things that happen are always born out of a holy discontent. I got a good friend sitting over here to my left named Kyle Allen. Kyle and his wife walked through a tragedy years ago, losing their little one and before birth, and God caused a holy discontent for you, didn't he? And what are you guys, Steph, you got your microphone real quick? Putting Kyle on the spot here, but this is, I looked over and I could not tell everybody what you and Heather are in the process of doing right now and why you're doing it. Here we go. We got you.
Yep. So like Mike mentioned, we lost our little girl, Lila Jane, back in 2016. And so we have just recently started a nonprofit called Lila's Legacy, where we want to, help families the same way that we were helped. A lot of that started with Mike and North Star. And so we just want to be a resource for families who are going through a very difficult time.
Thank you, Kyle. Would y'all let him know how proud you are of him? Holy discontent. Everybody look at me. It's when you go. It's not something needs to be done. I got to do it. That's holy discontent. We can sit where we are, yes or no. Was Nehemiah comfortable where he was? Yes. Nehemiah was comfortable till he drank something when somebody was trying to kill the king. Other than that, Nehemiah was very comfortable. Life was good for Nehemiah. But God stirred in Nehemiah a holy discontent, and he did three things. And I love this. Number one, he asked about the people. I want you to write this little statement down. Leadership begins and ends with people, doesn't it? We may all wear very different hats. Mike Russell's in communications at ETS. We've got our Chick-fil-A friends. We've got our FCA friends. We've got school friends in this room. Cobb County Schools, Kennesaw State represented in this room. Churches represented in this room, nonprofits, all kinds of stuff. Here's what I will tell you though. All of our leadership though begins and ends with people. I remember when North Star was starting back in 1997 and I met with my brother and he's an investment banker and David said something. He goes, Mike, me and you are in the same business. And I'm like, I don't think we're quite in the same business. And he's like, no, we're both in the people business. He said, my world's people business. Your world's the people business. Nehemiah asked about the people because he cared about the people. He wept about their situation. As you read Nehemiah chapter 1, I remember we spent a session or two on this. Nehemiah wept about the people. When somebody weeps over something, what does it tell you? They care. So this morning, as only the Lord would do it, I finished up my Scouts coaches Bible study call, and a couple of these guys may be watching right now. We had 71 guys on the call. In Miami, Florida, there was a gentleman who was weeping because he doesn't feel like what he's trying to give the kids is taking. And he was crying. He said, I just need wisdom because I just want to quit. I don't feel like what I'm doing for these kids in Miami, Florida, is working. And another coach who is a scout now with the Cincinnati Reds and is a longtime college baseball coach got on and he said, well, I hope this encourages you. 2 weeks ago, I led a player that played for me 30 years ago to Christ. What you're doing matters. But it begins with tears, doesn't it? He asked, he wept, and then he did this. He prayed about his involvement. It's really interesting. Nehemiah just didn't go out and do it. Nehemiah fasted and sought the Lord. Is this something you want me to do? Which leads to point number 2. He was guided by prayer. He was guided by prayer. Our tendency as leaders, when we get an idea, is to do what? Go for it. When do we go for it? Immediately, right? Which sometimes is the right thing. Other times, it's the wrong thing. If we ever get our actions before our prayers, what are we depending on? We're depending on ourselves. Nehemiah got it right. So, you guys don't know this. Some of our staff knows this. This idea started years ago with an event that I came up with, and we got off the ground within 3 weeks of the idea germinating in my mind, and we did it. We called it Merge, and it was merging the Bible and business, and we hosted a breakfast. Any of y'all remember this? Exactly. All right, and so there was nobody there but me and Stephanie, and I think Jamie came because he came once. All right, and so we looked around the room and there were 5 people, and 4 of them were employed at North Star, and we could have done it at 9, all right, instead of 6. Great idea that got ahead of its time. I acted before I did what? Prayed. Exact same thing we're doing now, except we spend a little more time processing this and praying through it. Here's what prayer does, and I want you to write this down. As a leader, prayer does not allow you to change God's mind. Prayer allows God to change your mind. When Nehemiah prayed, Nehemiah was shaped by the prayers. And I will tell you this too. So get Nehemiah 1:4. In fact, for days I mourned, I fasted, and I prayed to the God of heaven. When he fasted, that meant he gave up meals to seek the Lord. So Nehemiah goes, God, I need your thoughts and I need your heart. These are your people. They're not my people. Nehemiah didn't even live in Jerusalem. Nehemiah is telling God, God, these are your people, not my people. How many of y'all lead people in your organizations? Raise your hand. They're his people, not your people. Does that make sense to everybody? Maybe God put you in their journey for this season, but somebody else will occupy your seat one day, most likely. Nehemiah prayed. Number 3, Nehemiah was dedicated to hard work. Probably one of my favorite parts about Nehemiah. I think this point says it. All great leaders get their hands dirty. Why is that true? Why are great leaders willing to get their hands dirty? Give me a couple thoughts.
They're going to lead. They're going to start it out. Plus, they give them an opportunity when they lead others to have experience.
Good. So when they lead, they're going to start it out, and it gives opportunity for others to see what they've been doing. Why else do all great leaders get their hands dirty? Yeah, shows their people they believe. Great leaders serve, right? And serving requires you to get your hands dirty. Marlon.
My father was a volunteer fireman for 35 years. One of his advice he gave me was, son, if you call a work detail, you clean the bathrooms.
Do you call work detail, you clean the bathrooms. How did Jesus model that? He did a pretty good job at servant leadership. How did Jesus model it? Washed feet. How many of y'all saw the Jesus Revolution movie? Raise your hand. If you hadn't seen it, it's a great movie. I'm a little slow to the Christian movie game, but it really is a good movie, all right? This is one that's worth seeing. And there's a scene in the movie where all these hippies, this makes me feel really old to say hippies, but that's what the movie's about, all right? So all these hippies are going to this church, and the people in the church aren't happy about them coming because they said they don't walk with shoes on and their feet are dirty and it'll get our carpet dirty. This happens in churches sometimes, by the way. And so it's going to get our carpet dirty. And so they showed up at church one night and there's a line of these kids out down the street. And the older people of the church are walking up. And they are not happy about these kids that they explicitly told the pastor are not to attend their church because their feet are dirty and it's going to get the carpet dirty. And they go up, and Kelsey Grammer, who's playing the pastor, is down on his knees washing their feet as they go in. It's a powerful scene. All great leaders serve. I don't think you can do it unless you have dirt under your fingernails. I love how it says, Jesus said, the greatest among you must be a servant. Nehemiah had arisen to a place in his life. He didn't have to do this anymore. He worked for the king. But Nehemiah left that to get his fingers dirty. Now, it doesn't mean in leadership that you don't have people that do things, but it just means you need to be willing to do anything. I was with a guy for a while, and Jamie on our staff worked at Coca-Cola, and he was talking about one of the Coke legends, one of the presidents that was legends, and he said we had done a big Coke convention, and we're going out under the tunnel of this hotel. We're going down the back elevator to get in. He was a keynote guy, and he did the keynote with the Coca-Cola president. He said, we're going down, we're walking down the tunnel, and a Coke truck has backed up. A bottle, back when they did the bottled truck, backed up. And he said, we kept walking and turned around, and the Coke president was missing. And he turned around, and he had rolled up his sleeves, and he was unloading the truck. He said, a Coke man can't walk by a Coke truck. All great leaders serve. And some of you go, I know a lot of people wouldn't have stopped to help that truck. They might not be a great leader. And they definitely might not be a great spiritual leader. There may be some leaders that could walk by. We were at a coach's Bible study last year, and I had a house full of coaches and couples, and we were talking about a college football coach, Dabo Sweeney, and one of the coaches said, the craziest thing happened during the game. There was a play at the goal line where the pylon got knocked over. And he said, you know what I noticed? Dabo's down there arguing with the ref about where the guy went out of bounds. And then he leans down and he picks up the pylon and he repositions it and goes back. Servant leadership. Nehemiah got in there, and here's what you find in the story. Nehemiah is building with the people. Derek Jeter said this. He said, there may be people that have more talent than you. How many of y'all would agree there's other people in the world probably more talented than you? I heard Jensen Franklin, a great pastor here in Atlanta, say, don't get the big head. You may not have been God's first choice anyways. All right, and so it's true. He said, there may be people with more talent than you, but there's no excuse for anyone to work harder than you. If you didn't watch the ESPN, The Captain on Derek Jeter, it's a phenomenal documentary on his life. Number 4, he defended against the opposition. Nehemiah took up arms. And Nehemiah was willing to fight, and Nehemiah was willing to say no to stuff. And he had tons of critics. If you read the story, we spent a lot of time on his critics. Here's what effective spiritual leaders have. They have great discernment. They have great discernment. They have strong backbones. And they have tender hearts. Nehemiah was so strong, and yet he was so tender. He's willing to tell Sanballat, Tobiah, and all the guys we talked about in here, willing to tell them no, but then he was willing to get down and fight and help people. Number 5, he maintained integrity. That's what we talked about last month. He refused financial support that could have really, really helped him. A big red flashing light on your leadership dashboard is the feeling of entitlement or special treatment. And we have all felt it. The most dangerous phrase ever uttered in any organization or in any team is when people are willing to say, that's not my what? That means I'm entitled. I don't have to do that anymore. Nehemiah never got there. And I don't know how. Okay, let's be honest. How many of y'all have gotten to some point sometimes, and not that you stayed there, but you felt entitled at times? Raise your hand. You felt the pull of entitlement. I felt it. I don't need to do that. That's somebody else who's going to do that. Number 6, Nehemiah displayed courage. He threw one of the critics, so good, Tobiah, out of the temple. He didn't worry about hurting his feelings. I cannot be a people pleaser and a spiritual leader at the same time. Whew. Let me just stop this meeting right now and let me just say it this way. Hi, my name is Mike Lynch and I am a people pleaser. All right, and so this is very hard for me. I like people, and I like people to like me. How many of y'all are like that? And some of y'all are like, I don't need people to like me. We all know, all right? So, because we know people who don't. I like people to like me. And one of the things that was the hardest part about this job is I found out there were some people I liked that didn't like me. Most of them were named anonymous on the cards that they filled out, but I found out very quickly. My sweet little assistant, Ludell, who's been with me 20 years, did her best to get those off my desk, but they would find their way, and it would hurt my feelings so bad. But part of leadership, you got to be okay with that. To be a spiritual leader, and one of the things Nehemiah, he cared more about doing what was right. Does that make sense to everybody? He was a spiritual leader. He cared about the entire community. And finally, number 7, he was determined to finish well. Man, we did such a great month. If you missed last month, it's worth going to check on the YouTube channel because Chief Denner did such a great job talking about finishing well. So I replied by sending this message to them. Son, if this could be uttered about our lives, I am engaged in a what kind of work? What's he say? Help me out again. I'm engaged in what kind of work? A great work. I can't come down. Hey, Nehemiah, we need to talk to you. No, I'm busy. He knew what they wanted to talk about. They were just wanting to distract him from the goal. Why should I stop working to come be with you? This is something Steve Roach wrote this in our outline. I thought it was so good. If your yes is big enough, it makes it easier to say no. I'm working for a bigger yes. If your yes is big enough, it's easier to say no. So, Here's what I want you to do. Take 3 minutes at your table. Then I want you to talk about this question. Here's the question that's going to pop up on the screen. What of these traits was your favorite part about Nehemiah? It's going to pop up on the screen. You got 3 minutes. If you're online, talk around your conference room table, and we'll get back together in 3 minutes. All right, all right, all right. You know what I love about that is each one of us are hit by one of those traits. Well, today we get to wrap our Nehemiah series with somebody. He's at our luncheon every month. He's one of my favorite people in the world, a friend for 25 plus years, and a great thought leader in the area. I think he and Kevin Scott are two greatest thought leaders out in the area of leadership. So would y'all welcome Brian Dodd to our stage today? So Brian, before we get going, you got a brand new book out. They're going to put it up on the screen, Mighty. Tell everybody about the book, and then we're going to dive in and apply some of it.
Yeah, for anybody interested, there you go. By the way, all proceeds to that book go to a needy family in the area, mine. So if you want to help us out, that'll be great. But in terms of spiritual leadership, I was fascinated by David's mighty men that you find in 2 Samuel 23. And what I wanted to do is really do a deep dive into what made them mighty, because they were out in the wilderness. And it was a ragtag bunch, to say the very least. Distressed, bankrupt, the people nobody wanted. But God took them and ultimately created the leadership team that would be over Israel during its greatest period in human history. So I identified 7 traits out of 2 Samuel 23, and then I bring in modern day examples of people who are doing those traits. examples from business, athletics, education, ministry, all those things. And what I love about that book is at the end of each of the 7 skills that you'll need is discussion questions. So if you're looking to disciple some other leaders or develop some leaders on your team and staff, it is a book that you will enjoy it if you read it, but it's not meant to be read alone. It's meant to be read with other people. So really proud of that book and thrilled with how God's using it.
It's a really great book. And I thought about Nehemiah. What made Nehemiah a mighty leader to you?
Okay, so he does hit all 7 skills. And due to time, I will not hit all 7. But I will hit skill number 1, and that's production.
Yep.
You know, ultimately, us as leaders, there will become a time that we will stand in front of our people and we're saying, okay, here's where we're going, follow me. And they will either follow because they love you and they want to follow you, or their paycheck will mandate that they follow you. But ultimately what will happen is everybody on that journey at one point will go, are we actually getting to this desired destination we all bought into or not? And everybody will have. So productivity validates your leadership and ensures that you get to the people will take extended stays and additional journeys with you. Nehemiah, productivity, finished the walls in 52 days. Yep. Okay, so a man of great productivity. Here's the interesting thing to me about Nehemiah and productivity, though. There are 13 chapters in Nehemiah. 5.5 are on the project, building the project. 7.5 are building the people. So I'll ask everybody out here, is it easier to get a task accomplished or to build up people who will help you get task accomplished? It's kind of an IQ question a little bit. It is, doing it yourself's a lot easier.
Yeah.
So what Nehemiah doesn't get the credit for that he should is the building of the people who would inhabit the walls that they just built. So from the 7 skills, the one that speaks to me the most is productivity.
We were talking up here while y'all were talking at the table about vision. Nehemiah had great vision and was able to translate that vision, but you said, ask me about vision. So I'm going to ask you about vision.
Okay, so we're all going to learn something together because I'm learning this. Where there is no vision, the people perish, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so what we classify as leaders as a vision is a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year plan. Okay, we put it on the wall, we put it on our website. This is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there, mission, vision. I'm changing my mind on vision and the definition of it. So you've got microwaved ideas and crock-potted ideas. And obviously everything tastes better coming out of a crock pot. This idea that I have is not even to the microwave stage. It is like on the microwave shelf at the grocery store, and I've kind of put it in my cart, and I've not even made it to the checkout line yet. But here's what I think. So Sonia, my wife, is here today. She retires from Piedmont Church. So we've been going here about 6-8 weeks. If someone was to ask me, North Star Church, what's it going to be in 1 year, 3 year, and 5 years? I have no idea. Okay, I don't, if we define vision as a strategic plan with a timeline and activities, I don't know. But here's what I saw just yesterday. From the time, I'm changing my definition of vision to what do you see, feel, and hear on a daily basis? In other words, you could almost call that your culture. What do you see, feel, and hear on a daily basis compounded over 12, 36, and 60 months? So yesterday I drive on the North Stars campus. I'm park over here across the creek. And what happens is I come into the parking lot and the parking lot team is all there and in place. All volunteers. So you've got one there and then you got one at what I call the elbows, so as the car would make it to its spot. There's one at every location. The person that heads up your parking team, Zach, was leading in front with somebody else, getting your hands dirty, and he was investing with the person who was there at the front. Then I come across the bridge, nice people along the way. I then run into Mike Lindeman at the tent. And Mike is sitting there handing out bags to serve the poor and under-resourced in our community. And Mike is fantastic. So I pass Mike, and you've got that unbelievable parking guy who's got the truck and the radio and all of that. He is unbelievable. And so anyway, I see him, and then I notice the cars lined up past where I can see around Compass as he's letting people go across. And then I come up to the door, and I get met by Jamie Maddox and somebody else at the door. So we're talking a 2-minute experience. Here's what I know about North Star in 2 minutes. If you were to ask me the vision of North Star, and I was helping you put it into language, I'd say North Star is a church where people can find joy and meaning in their human life, learn their spiritual gifts, begin to utilize them to serve other people, and it will be a place that as they do that, they will find joy and contentment in community as they do it with other people, while at the same time serving their community. And what we will do is do that to more and more people over an extended period of time, led for and modeled by our staff. I got all that in 2 minutes. If I was writing your vision statement, I've not even made it into the building or the sanctuary. If I was writing...
Still a good time for me to ruin this experience, by the way.
If I was writing your vision, that's where I'd start. So I am totally rethinking what we traditionally think of as vision definitions.
And Nehemiah got a group of people that didn't even know him to buy into building a wall in 52 days. How do you do that?
I think they had a deep burden too. You know, what the walls represented had to do with their self-esteem. It had to do with their dignity. It had to do with their safety. I mean, there are some practical things there too. And they have just come back from Babylon. They had been exiled in Babylon, and they wanted their life back. You know, they wanted dignity. They wanted something to be proud of. They wanted somewhere that they could raise their kids. And God rose up a leader who spoke that language and met their need. And I think too, Mike, it's a great question. Spiritual leadership, and as we're wrapping up Nehemiah, it's a perfect picture of spiritual leadership and leadership. And we've talked about this definition for years. Leadership is about getting things done, mobilizing people, mobilizing resources, you know, strategic plans, accomplishments, timelines, those kind of things, getting things done. Spiritual leadership is about getting on God's agenda, knowing what He wants to accomplish, once again, what He wants to accomplish at this point in time in human history through our life, and then He raises up you to accomplish His purposes. Nehemiah was raised up. God had put a burden in his heart to accomplish what God wanted to accomplish at that point in time in human history.
You know, it's funny, Nehemiah doesn't get it done if he can't handle opposition.
Right.
Why does how a leader handles opposition make or break them?
Okay, this is where, and look, as a leader, it comes with the fine print of the leadership contract. Okay, we all face opposition. This is where understanding spiritual leadership and framing it in that context is critical. If we're going to accomplish something great for God, God's plans, God's purposes at this point in time in human history, well, Satan's just not going to sit back and just let that go. You know, Satan is not omnipresent like God. He's a single individual and has a certain number of, I'll call them allies, called demons that he can deploy. And he's a master of deployment. So if you're somewhere where God's purposes are not being accomplished, you probably won't face that level of opposition. You're doing a good enough job messing yourself up, okay? But if you're accomplishing God's plans, expect opposition. And here's what opposition looks like, and we learn it from Sanballat and Tobiah. Nehemiah's on the wall, he's working. And this happens multiple times. He's on the wall, he's working, and they come. What opposition does is they distract, they discourage, they divide. I wrote some other words here. They tempt and they agitate. I was at the Southern Baptist Convention 2 summers ago, and just being totally candid. I mean, it was a bloodbath. I mean, it was bad. And so what happened was that's when the Me Too issues they were dealing with, and it was angry and rough, and demonstrators everywhere, and it was challenging. David Jeremiah, the great pastor at Shadow Mountain out in San Diego, was the keynote speaker. And David stands up and he delivers a great keynote address, and he is a godly man, probably about 80 or so now. And he stands up and he looks at everybody at the end and he goes, I'm hearing y'all got some business thing y'all got to kind of deal with or something. Well, do me a favor, just deal with your business and get back to preaching with the gospel. When you're standing on the wall as a leader, you are above these issues. You're above them physically, okay? I think him up on the wall was a picture of this. You're above it in importance. And when you're doing God's work and the agitators come and the dividers come and the anonymous people come, I'll just be 100. My wife tells me this. Y'all are above that. I mean, that anonymous thing, right in the garbage if it somehow gets by Lou Dell. Yep. What you're dealing with is above that. So, opposition is real. It is to be acknowledged. It is to be expected. It is to be addressed. Now, when you address it, you don't want to be overly harsh, but you don't want to be overly dismissive. Through prayer and discernment, there's that fine point where you address it, but then you're back on the wall, you're working, you're above whatever that is. And that's what Nehemiah did.
And I love this, and we'll wrap with that, because you've all been called to a great task. We all just wear different uniforms while we accomplish the task. Some of you are in business, some of you in police work and law enforcement, some of you are in city government. Listen, we all have very different hats we wear to do the work, but we're all doing the same work, and that's making a difference for the kingdom. Don't come down off the wall. Would you pray with me? Father, today it is so good to look at a man like Nehemiah, who left us skills and left us a journey and left us hope that if he can do it, we can do it. God, I pray over each one of these in this room that as we put our hands back on the bricks and the swords, as we build our own walls, that God, at the end of the day, we will finish that wall strong and complete, just as you wanted. And Father, that is my prayer, and I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Would y'all thank Brian for being up here with me today?
I think it's easy for us to forget right there at the end when Brian was talking about those things that distract and discourage and divide and agitate, that I bet we could go around the room right now and at every table there would be a story of that. And I would just say as a reminder to that of not coming off the wall, that when we lead out in front in this spiritual way, that just puts a bigger target on your head sometimes. And so these resources that we've shared with you today, this book, I went down and wrote down those 7 traits: production, passion, resilience, teamwork, contentment, courage, and faith, all things that we need as leaders. I hope that you've enjoyed this study of Nehemiah over these past few months. I've asked them to put up on the screen all of the dates for the next Lunch with Leader. If you've got your phone and you just want to take a quick picture, that might be the easiest way. We would love for you to invite your coworkers, the other folks on your team. Always room for more here. So we'll leave that up for you guys. Hope that you have enjoyed today. Meet somebody on your way out. Have a great summer. We'll see you in August, everybody.